My Govanin, and welcome back to Medieval Art or Brian Keane. And again, I'm here with Dave Lewis of Cinema Millennials. Dave, we saw so many portents of things to come, and we've deepened our understanding of numerous relationships across Middle-earth. So what stood out to you this week?
The thing that stood out to me the most is the theme of fathers and their legacies and how their legacies affect their sons or daughters. And
Yeah,
I think, I mean, we get that through so many different characters. We get that through Durin and Durin. We get Elrond, Elros. We get Tar-Palantír and Míriel. We're getting, obviously, Isildur and Elendil. I mean, so many great things.
I think you're right. You've sort of taken us across Middle-earth in that we're seeing the roles that these family relationships have, and especially the theme of legacy. And I think where legacy relates to both the racial tensions that we see across Middle-earth, but also the religious tensions that we'll start to see gradually developing between the faithful and those that are still loyal to Morgoth and the sort of old ways of light and dark and good and evil. I think when you began by mentioning Durin and Durin, we see there's this secrecy of the dwarves, but the elves are already suspecting. So how did you read that scene between Elrond and Durin and Elrond and Disa this week?
I think they're trying to have that that the popular culture belief of, the idea of the elves versus the dwarves kind of sizzling underneath there. But I also think that there could be an even greater force behind these two meeting together, with the idea of Celebrimbor and how he's kind of pushing Elrond to go deeper, to delve deeper, if you will, into the minds of Moria and see what's going on there.
I love that. And it was precisely Celebrimbor's insistence that Elrond sort of pry and delve a little bit more. And did you get a sense that when there was that sort of cave-in the mines, when they're first encountering Mithrod or Mithril, that I got a sense that maybe we're hearing a Balrog? Maybe that's just me wanting to hear that they're
Oh,
beginning to start to delve, but there was some kind of grumbling or gurgling in the deep. And with Disa's sort of spiritual, musical, prayer to the mountain, that was one of the most moving moments. But I just kept thinking, is this their gradual downfall? Just as we're gradually seeing the downfall of Numenor and we're gradually seeing the downfall of the Southlands. I mean, was there anything else that I may have missed or that you picked up on in those mines or elsewhere?
no, I think you're absolutely correct on that. I didn't even think about that. I think the idea of her speaking and singing to the mind, singing to the rock, and that exactly that rumbling that we get, maybe that is the echo of the Balrog hearing that. Maybe there are a couple other things. I mean, talking about spirituality and downfall, I think looking at Isildur, who is talking to Isildur? Is it a Valar? Is it a Maya? Is it maybe, Sauron is a changeling? Maybe he can change his spirit and his voice as well, pushing him towards the west, the true Numenor, the true west of Arda as a whole. I think there's a lot of things throughout this episode where we can see the spirituality. I mean, of course, how could we forget Adar being father? There is that almost we're seeing orc burial rites and situations like that. I thought that was really cool that they're bringing more nuance to the orcs, as well as bringing that not dark elf, because that's a whole nother thing. There is a corrupted elf that could be in the worship of Sauron as well.
Yeah, I think the Adar character is one that I'm going to want to see develop even further. The way that he's referred to as Lord Father by the orcs, that really touching moment where I sensed some emotion in him even before he sort of passes the orc on to the next life. But he mentions a childhood and being familiar with Beleriand and familiar with the river, the mouth of the river that Arondir speaks of. So there are some aspects of his character that are still puzzling to me, and I don't have him fully worked out yet. I know all the fan theories are out there, but I'm leaving it wide open. If we shift back then, because I love your theme about fathers and legacies, I was grateful that we finally glimpsed Tar-Palantír, and I was convinced after last week that we would have seen him in a Palantiri, one of the lost seeing stones, but in fact
Right.
seeing him in the bed and then opening his eyes at that moment when Nimlot was shedding her leaves. I mean, how did you read that relationship between Tar-Palantír and Míriel, and then even Galadriel and her relationship to the Númenóreans?
Muriel truly cares about her father. She is this caretaker for her father. You can tell that she's being held back about what she really wants to do. She's very conflicted throughout the whole thing. I mean, when we were going up to the scene behind me, she's very, very conflicted. She has this deep love for her father, and but she also, at the same time, what does she say? Faith something along the lines of faith cannot hang on a kingdom cannot hang on faith alone, or something like that. And that to me is going to be an interesting concept for her as a character, and her relationship to Pharazôn, and how we're going to go forward with that. I think there is a deep spirituality within these episodes that we're not exactly getting. Yes, they're being mentioned, but that's so Tolkienian of it itself.
Well, and even with Pharazôn, we have his relationship with his newly invented son Kemen, which reminds me a
Yes.
little bit of other relationships we've seen in Gondor later in the Peter Jackson trilogies, but also in that really pivotal scene before Galadriel and Tar-Míriel are looking into the Palantír. They're in a room surrounded by relics, and I think we've spoken about possibly Narsil off to your side, possibly a reference to Beren and Luthien. I think maybe I glimpsed the helmet of Dorlomin. I mean, there was a lot that was in this space, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think I was unsure about the helmet of Dorlomin. I'd have to zoom in a little bit more, but I think you're exactly right. You saw the dragon on the helm. I think that there's the shield of Turgon in the back with the swan's wings. I definitely think whatever direction this is in is Narsil. I mean, it has the material iconography, if you will, of Narsil as general audiences know it to be, Anduril as well. So I think there's a lot of things that we're getting here. And, the idea of them having Amazon not having the rights to a lot of things, having the rights of the Lord of the Rings appendices and the Hobbit, I think they're not really fully disclosing what they actually have the rights to.
I agree. I mean, when we hear the reference to Armenelos, a word that I'll have to go back to the appendices, but I don't remember encountering it. There's greater aspects of the lore that they're pulling from, and that's I think a really wonderful blessing for fans.
Yeah.
I love those touches because it draws us further into this world and reminds us how much Tolkien created over such a long period of time,
Right.
And it was something, as we've talked before a little bit about in terms of adaptations. This is yet another adaptation, and I'm feeling really great about where we're going. I think there's still a lot yet to behold. I wanted to dive back into one other father-son legacy that we've hinted at, but with Elrond and Elros, and then having Eärendil, there have been so many hints about Eärendil that link us all the way back to the Lord of the Rings that we know so well.
Yes.
Was there anything else that we can eke out from what we've heard so far?
I think one of the best parts about this show is the intertextuality, and I think I talked about this before. We're getting a lot of self-referential things throughout the whole world, but Eärendil is, I mean, one of the greatest people in the whole of the lore. And to get that fully formed emotional response from Elrond and saying, I wish I had my father with me. I still wish he was here, despite all of our, quabbles and, things like that. I wish he was still here, to feel that like half human, half, because a lot of people say about these shows that the elves don't feel human enough. That's where you're getting the half elven from here. And I think that's one of the best parts is, yes, they're not quote unquote canon or however you feel, but throughout Tolkien's whole history of writing these stories, they've all changed 100 billion times. So I think to get a more fully fleshed out character and personalized emotional idea of who these characters are is great.
I agree with you. And I think in our last 30 seconds, one of the last details that just occurred to me as you're speaking is, of course, we can't forget fully about the people of the Southlands. And there was a moment when Bronwyn mentions Orodruin, and, it's this fiery mountain, Mount Doom. And I think we've glimpsed Mount Doom before as a snow-capped peak. I'm really curious to see what happens in this land that we've only known as Shadow. Any other last thoughts about the Southlands before we end our time this week?
I mean, there's definitely an underbelly of something going on with that whole confrontation with Waldreg and Theo. I think there's something something is hidden in the shadows.
Something is indeed hidden in the shadows, and the shadow of Morgoth and Sauron loom still so large. So thank you again, Dave. We have so much more to talk about in our coming weeks, and Namarie to all.
Namarie.